The spotlight dims in the center ring, and a single figure emerges from the shadows. White face paint gleams under the soft glow, a red nose catches the light, and oversized shoes shuffle across sawdust with a sound like whispered secrets. The clown pauses, turns to face an invisible audience, and in that moment of stillness, something ancient stirs. For thousands of years, humans have needed these figures who walk the line between laughter and tears, between chaos and order, between the mundane world and something altogether more mysterious. Did you know that the word clown likely comes from the Icelandic word cluny, meaning a clumsy person? Or that ancient Egyptian pharaohs kept pygmy performers at court specifically to make them laugh? Throughout human history, every civilization has created its own version of the fool, the jester, the trickster who reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously. Tonight on Midnight Deep Dive, we're exploring the painted faces and hidden hearts of clowns throughout history. From sacred tricksters in ancient temples to birthday party entertainers in suburban backyards, from silent film legends to the modern therapeutic clowns bringing laughter to hospital rooms, we'll discover how these figures of comedy and chaos have shaped human culture in ways both profound and playful. So settle in, allow the gentle rhythm of this story to wash over you, and let yourself drift peacefully as we uncover the surprising, touching, and sometimes unsettling history of those who make us laugh while wearing masks of joy and sorrow. Long before recorded history, before written language captured human experience, our ancestors understood something fundamental about the power of transformation. In caves illuminated by flickering firelight, shamans would don masks and animal skins, becoming something other than themselves. They would dance, gesture wildly, make sounds that were neither quite human nor quite animal. In those moments of transformation, they weren't just performing. They were opening doorways between the ordinary world and realms of mystery and magic. This impulse toward transformation, toward becoming something other than ourselves for the purpose of teaching, healing, or entertaining, represents the deepest roots of clowning. The first clowns weren't entertainers in any modern sense. They were sacred figures, bridge builders between human consciousness and the wild, unpredictable forces that ancient peoples saw operating in the world around them. Archaeological evidence suggests that ritual performers, including those playing foolish or comedic roles, have existed for at least 40,000 years. Cave paintings from France and Spain show figures in animal masks engaged in what appear to be ceremonial dances. Some anthropologists believe these masked performers served multiple functions in early human communities, including the crucial role of releasing social tension through laughter and absurdity. Ancient Egyptian culture provides some of our earliest clear documentation of professional entertainers who fit the description of clowns. The Egyptian royal courts employed what were called danga, performers who combined acrobatics, music, and physical comedy. These weren't simple jesters. They held respected positions in palace hierarchies and were often well compensated for their talents. Hieroglyphic records from the 5th dynasty show that Pharaoh Pepi II requested the services of a particular dancer from Nubia, someone described as performing remarkable feats that made the court laugh with delight. But it was in ancient Greece and Rome that we find the true ancestors of Western clowning traditions. Greek theater introduced specific character types who would echo through centuries of performance. The Iron was a clever underdog who won through wit rather than strength. The Alazan was a pompous buffoon, forever making grandiose claims that would inevitably be deflated. These weren't just entertainment conventions. They were recognized social archetypes that audiences understood instinctively. Characters who revealed truth through exaggeration and absurdity. Greek mimes performed throughout the Mediterranean world, their acts combining physical comedy, satire, and social commentary. Unlike tragic actors who wore elaborate masks and formal costumes, mime performers often worked with bare faces, using exaggerated expressions and physical gestures to convey emotion and narrative. They performed in markets, at festivals, and sometimes even at private gatherings for the wealthy. Their art form was considered lowbrow compared to formal theater, yet it reached far more people and often wielded greater social influence through its accessibility. Roman culture elevated certain forms of comedy to remarkable sophistication. The stupidus character in Roman farce represented an early version of the clown archetype we recognize today, a fool whose apparent simplicity concealed unexpected wisdom. Roman mimes expanded beyond their Greek predecessors, adding more complex narratives and characters to their repertoires. The archimimus, or lead mime, became a celebrity figure in Roman society, with successful performers achieving wealth and social standing that would have been unthinkable in earlier eras. One of the most fascinating aspects of Roman entertainment was the Atelan farce, originating in the town of Atella. These performances featured stock characters who would become templates for clowns throughout Western history. There was Maccus, the foolish character with an enormous hooked nose; Bucco, the braggart with big cheeks who was always getting into trouble; Pappus, the foolish old man; and Dawsinus, the cunning hunchback. Sound familiar? These characters would be reborn centuries later in Italian Commedia dell'Arte, and continue influencing clown characterization into the modern era. The Romans also introduced an element that would haunt clowning throughout history: the cruel edge of comedy. In Roman amphitheaters, condemned criminals were sometimes forced to participate in fatal comic spectacles, wearing costumes and playing foolish roles before their execution. This dark undercurrent, the idea that the clown might be laughing while suffering, that comedy might mask tragedy, would become a recurring theme in how cultures understood and depicted clowns. What's remarkable about these ancient traditions is how they recognized that comedy serves essential social functions. The fool could say what others couldn't. The mime could mock the powerful in ways that formal discourse couldn't allow. The comedian created temporary spaces where normal social hierarchies dissolved into laughter, where the high could be brought low and the low elevated, at least for the duration of the performance. Ancient Chinese and Indian theatrical traditions developed their own rich clowning conventions during this same period. Chinese opera featured comic characters who provided relief from serious dramatic sections, while often delivering some of the production's most important moral lessons. Indian Sanskrit drama included the Vidashaka, a Brahmin clown character who served as companion to the hero, combining high caste status with deliberately foolish behavior in ways that allowed sharp social commentary. These ancient clowning traditions shared common elements across cultures: the use of physical transformation through costume and makeup, the inversion of normal social rules, the combination of entertainment with deeper social and spiritual purposes, and the recognition that laughter itself held power. Power to heal, to teach, to release tension, and to speak truths that might otherwise be dangerous to voice. As organized religions developed throughout the medieval period, the figure of the fool underwent a remarkable transformation. Rather than disappearing under the weight of religious solemnity, fools and jesters found themselves woven into the very fabric of sacred and secular power structures. The medieval court jester represents one of history's most fascinating social positions. A person granted immunity from normal rules of speech and behavior, someone who could speak truth to power precisely because they were clothed in the protection of apparent foolishness. The position of court jester emerged gradually throughout medieval Europe, reaching its height between the 12th and 17th centuries. These weren't simple entertainers hired for parties. They were permanent household members, often living in the palace itself, holding positions that came with salaries, allowances, and sometimes even land grants. The relationship between a king and his jester was intimate and complex, built on trust that transcended normal hierarchical boundaries. Consider the remarkable privileges granted to court jesters. They could mock the king to his face. They could comment on political decisions that would have sent any other courtier to the dungeon. They could tell jokes at the expense of powerful nobles, visiting dignitaries, even religious figures. This wasn't mere entertainment. It served a crucial psychological and political function. The jester provided a safety valve for the king's ego, a source of honest feedback in a world where everyone else told the monarch only what they wanted to hear. The most successful jesters combined quick wit with deep intelligence and remarkable courage. They had to read the room perfectly, understanding exactly how far they could push before crossing the line from amusing to dangerous. Historical records preserve stories of legendary jesters whose cleverness saved their lives and sometimes influenced major political decisions. One famous example involves Tribolet, jester to King Francis I of France. According to legend, Tribolet once slapped the king on the back in jest. Francis, furious at this familiarity, told Tribolet he would be executed unless he could come up with an apology even more insulting than the original offense. Tribolet thought for a moment and said, "I'm terribly sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't recognize you. I mistook you for the Queen." His wit saved his life. The king laughed and the matter was dropped. But the medieval fool tradition went beyond court entertainment. In Christian tradition, particularly in Eastern Orthodox churches, there emerged the concept of the holy fool or fool for Christ. These were individuals who deliberately adopted foolish behavior and appearance as a form of spiritual practice. They rejected worldly status, comfort, and conventional behavior, often living in poverty and speaking in riddles or engaging in apparently nonsensical acts that were believed to contain hidden spiritual truths. Holy fools occupied a unique space in medieval society. They were simultaneously revered and mocked, seen as touched by God and yet treated as social outcasts. Their foolishness was understood as a kind of divine madness, a rejection of worldly wisdom in favor of a higher understanding that ordinary people couldn't grasp. Some became saints, their strange behaviors later interpreted as prophetic acts or demonstrations of profound spiritual insight. The Feast of Fools, celebrated in medieval Europe, represented an extraordinary inversion of normal religious and social order. On specific days, particularly around the New Year, lower clergy would elect a bishop of fools or abbot of unreason. The celebration involved elaborate parodies of church services, with participants wearing masks and outrageous costumes, singing bawdy songs, and engaging in generally absurd behavior within the church itself. This wasn't sacrilege, but rather a sanctioned release valve, a temporary carnival where normal rules were suspended under the understanding that such reversals actually reinforced social order by allowing people to blow off steam. Indigenous cultures worldwide developed their own traditions of sacred clowns that parallel these European practices in fascinating ways. Native American tribes across North America had contraries or sacred clowns who did everything backwards. Among the Lakota, the Heyoka behaved oppositely to normal customs, wearing warm clothes in summer and light clothes in winter, riding horses backwards, speaking in opposites. These figures served important spiritual and social functions, reminding the community that reality is more complex than it appears, and that wisdom sometimes requires seeing things from unexpected angles. The Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest developed elaborate sacred clown traditions that continue today. During ceremonial dances, clown figures engage in seemingly disrespectful or crude behavior, but this behavior serves serious purposes. It teaches proper conduct by demonstrating improper conduct. It releases social tension, and it connects the community with sacred powers through laughter and chaos. West African cultures developed trickster traditions embodied in figures like Anansi the spider, whose stories combine entertainment with moral instruction. Anansi is clever, but often foolish, successful, but frequently the victim of his own schemes. These trickster tales served similar functions to court jesters in European societies. They allowed the questioning of authority and social norms through the safe medium of storytelling about a character who was neither fully human nor fully other. The medieval understanding of foolishness recognized something profound, that wisdom and folly are more closely related than they appear. The fool's privilege to speak truth came from occupying a position outside normal social categories. Not quite noble but not quite common, not quite sane but not quite mad, not quite serious but not quite frivolous. The fool existed in an ambiguous space that made genuine honesty possible. Religious traditions across cultures recognized that the divine often speaks through unlikely voices. The prophet who seems mad, the saint who acts foolishly, the beggar who dispenses wisdom. These figures appear in religious narratives worldwide, suggesting a deep human intuition that conventional wisdom might miss important truths, and that fools sometimes see clearly what the wise overlook. Imagine a marketplace in 16th century Venice. Crowds gather around a makeshift stage where traveling performers are about to begin their show. There's no script, no elaborate set design, just wooden planks propped on barrels and a handful of actors wearing leather half-masks. One performer appears in a black mask with a hooked nose and hunchback, wearing a servant's costume. Another wears white face paint and an elegant costume covered in diamond patterns. They begin to move, to gesture, to speak in exaggerated dialects, and suddenly the crowd is transported. This is Commedia dell'Arte, and it will revolutionize the art of comedy forever. Commedia dell'Arte emerged in Italy around 1550 and would dominate European theater for over 200 years. The term translates roughly as comedy of the professional artists, distinguishing these performers from amateur court entertainers. What made Commedia revolutionary was its reliance on improvisation built around stock characters. Each performer specialized in a particular character type, wearing the same mask and costume for their entire career, mastering that character's movements, voice, and personality so thoroughly that they could improvise scenes on any subject while remaining true to their archetypal role. The cast of Commedia dell'Arte characters reads like a gallery of human types. There were the lovers, always young and beautiful, speaking in elegant Tuscan dialect. There were the masters, pompous authority figures like Il Daughter, the pedantic scholar spouting nonsensical Latin, or Il Capitano, the cowardly military braggart. And then there were the servants, the zanni, whose clever schemes and physical comedy would become the template for clowns throughout Western history. Arlecchino, or Harlequin, stands as perhaps the most influential clown character ever created. In early Commedia, Harlequin was a poor servant, cunning but often hungry, wearing a costume of patches because he couldn't afford whole cloth. Over time, those patches evolved into the familiar diamond pattern that became Harlequin's signature. His character combined acrobatic skill with verbal wit, physical comedy with occasional wisdom. Harlequin was perpetually in trouble, eternally optimistic, always hungry, and somehow managing to land on his feet through a combination of luck and cleverness. The genius of Harlequin lay in his adaptability. Performers could adjust the character to different audiences and situations, while maintaining core traits that made him instantly recognizable. In some versions, he was an innocent simpleton. In others, a crafty schemer. Sometimes a romantic fool, other times a cynical survivor. This flexibility allowed Harlequin to evolve across centuries, appearing in everything from street performances to elaborate court spectacles, always remaining fundamentally himself while adapting to changing times. Brighella represented a darker variation of the servant character, clever and calculating, willing to scheme and manipulate for personal gain. While Harlequin's schemes usually backfired comically, Brighella often succeeded through cunning that bordered on cruelty. This character acknowledged that not all fools are innocent, that cleverness can serve selfish ends as well as comic ones. Pulcinella, with his hooked nose, hunchback, and squeaky voice, embodied the triumph of wit over physical limitation. This character would migrate throughout Europe, transforming into Punch in England, of Punch and Judy fame, Polichinelle in France, and influencing countless later clown characterizations. Pulcinella's appeal lay in his combination of physical grotesqueness and sharp intelligence. He proved that you didn't need to be beautiful or powerful to outwit your betters. Pierrot emerged later in the Commedia tradition, but would become enormously influential, particularly in French pantomime. While other characters wore leather half-masks, Pierrot's face was painted white with a simple black tear below one eye. His costume was loose white clothing with large buttons and a white cap. Unlike the energetic, scheming Zanny, Pierrot was sad, lovelorn, and poetic. He represented the melancholy side of the fool, the clown who feels too deeply, who is victimized rather than victorious. The development of Pierrot reveals something important about the evolution of clowning: the recognition that comedy and tragedy are intimately connected. Pierrot could make audiences laugh, but his laughter often felt bittersweet. His foolishness came not from stupidity, but from naivety, from being too trusting in a cynical world. Artists and poets became fascinated with Pierrot, seeing in him a reflection of their own vulnerability and emotional sensitivity. Commedia dell'Arte performances followed loose scenarios called canovacci, story outlines that provided the basic plot structure, but left the actual dialogue and business to be improvised by the performers. A typical scenario might involve young lovers trying to marry despite opposition from older authority figures, with the clever servants helping or hindering various plots and schemes. The framework remained consistent, but every performance was unique, shaped by audience response, performer energy, and spontaneous inspiration. The physical demands of Commedia dell'Arte were extraordinary. Performers trained for years to master the acrobatic skills required for their characters. Harlequin actors needed to execute impressive jumps, flips, and pratfalls. They developed specific physical lazzi, bits of comic business that could be inserted into any scenario. These might include elaborate mock battles using wooden swords, comedy routines involving props like letters or food, or extended sequences of physical misunderstanding and mishap. Women performers in Commedia dell'Arte, while less common than men, played crucial roles. The character of Columbina, a clever servant woman who was often Harlequin's love interest, demonstrated that female performers could be just as skilled at physical comedy and improvisational wit as their male counterparts. The presence of women in Commedia troupes was actually progressive for its time, when most theatrical traditions excluded female performers entirely. Commedia dell'Arte spread throughout Europe via traveling troupes. Italian companies performed at courts from London to Moscow, adapting their scenarios to different languages and cultures while maintaining their core character types. Local theater traditions absorbed Commedia influences, and the stock characters began appearing in everything from French farce to English pantomime to Spanish theater. The influence of Commedia dell'Arte on subsequent theatrical tradition cannot be overstated. Shakespeare almost certainly saw Commedia performances and incorporated elements into his comedies. Molière acknowledged his debt to Italian comedy. The physical comedy techniques developed by Commedia performers became fundamental to European theatrical training. Even today, theater students study Commedia characters and techniques as essential elements of their craft. The smoky interior of London's Sadler's Wells Theatre on a December evening in 1806 filled with anticipation. The audience, packed into every available seat, waited for the appearance of a performer who had become the talk of the town. Then he emerged, a figure in white face paint with red triangles on his cheeks, wearing an absurd costume that exaggerated his movements. This was Joseph Grimaldi, and he was about to transform clowning from a theatrical convention into an art form unto itself. Grimaldi didn't invent stage clowning, but he perfected it, and gave it a form that would echo through the next 2 centuries. Before Grimaldi, clowns in English pantomime were relatively minor characters. After Grimaldi, the clown became the star, the figure audiences came specifically to see. His innovation lay in combining virtuosic physical comedy with genuine pathos, creating characters who were simultaneously hilarious and heartbreaking. The character Grimaldi created became known simply as Joey, and even today, British performers sometimes refer to clowns as Joeys in his honor. Grimaldi's Joey was mischievous, greedy, and childlike, engaging in elaborate schemes to steal food or avoid work, but always with such transparency that his failures were as entertaining as his successes. Grimaldi could communicate complex emotions through exaggerated facial expressions and physical gestures that transcended the limits of the theatrical space, making his performance visible and emotionally legible even to those in the cheapest seats. His signature makeup became the template for what we now call whiteface clowning. A completely white base with red accents highlighting the cheeks and mouth, often with exaggerated eyebrows and other facial features painted in bold colors. This wasn't arbitrary fashion. The makeup served practical purposes in an era of candlelight and gaslight theater, making facial expressions visible from a distance, while also creating a mask-like effect that allowed the performer to become someone else entirely. But Grimaldi's life reveals the darker side of the clowning profession that would become a recurring theme throughout circus history. The physical demands of his performances took a severe toll on his body. By his early 40s, he was suffering from crippling pain and could barely walk. His personal life was marked by tragedy. His first wife died young, his sons struggled with alcoholism and died before him. Grimaldi's autobiography, written toward the end of his life, reveals a man haunted by the contrast between the joy he brought others and his own suffering. He wrote about being the Grimaldi behind the smiling Joey, coining a phrase that captured the paradox at the heart of professional comedy. The 19th century saw the rise of the modern circus, and with it, a new platform for clowning that would take the art in directions that theater never could. The circus ring presented unique challenges and opportunities for clowns. The circular performance space meant that audiences surrounded the performers, requiring a different approach to staging and movement. Clowns couldn't simply face the audience and perform. They had to work in the round, aware of spectators on all sides. The circus environment also fostered the development of distinct clown types that persist today. The whiteface clown, descended from Grimaldi's theatrical tradition, became the authority figure in circus comedy, elegant, intelligent, and superior. The whiteface typically wore elaborate costumes and possessed refined mannerisms. They represented order and propriety, setting up situations that would be disrupted by their comic opposite. That opposite was the august clown, whose development represented a genuine breakthrough in circus history. According to legend, the august character was created by accident in 1869, when a German performer named Tom Belling stumbled into the ring wearing ill-fitting clothes and a red nose, causing the audience to shout August, German slang for fool or clumsy person. The August became the everyman clown, messy, emotional, impulsive, and constantly at odds with the refined whiteface. August clowns wore exaggerated versions of ordinary clothing, had wild hair, sported bright red noses, and generally embodied cheerful chaos. The dynamic between whiteface and August created a comedy partnership that proved endlessly fertile. The whiteface would attempt to demonstrate something, a magic trick, a musical performance, an acrobatic feat, and the August would disrupt, misunderstand, or accidentally sabotage the demonstration. This wasn't just slapstick. It was a sophisticated comedy of contrasts that reflected social tensions between authority and rebellion, refinement and earthiness, intention and accident. A third clown type emerged in early 20th century America, the tramp or hobo clown. These characters wore tattered but dignified clothing, often sporting beards, painted or real, and embodied a more melancholy comedy rooted in the experience of economic hardship. The tramp clown combined pathos with resilience, representing those on society's margins with sympathy and humor rather than condescension. This character type reflected the reality of Depression-era America while also echoing older theatrical traditions of the noble fool. The greatest circus clowns became international celebrities. Dan Rice, considered America's first great circus clown, was so popular in the mid-1800s that he ran for president, albeit not very seriously. His patriotic costume, striped pants, star-spangled jacket, and top hat may have influenced the Uncle Sam imagery we associate with American national identity. Rice demonstrated that clowns could be not just entertainers, but cultural figures who shaped national consciousness. The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, which billed itself as the greatest show on earth, featured clowns as essential elements of their massive spectacles. These weren't just individual performers. They were organized troupes of clowns executing elaborate group routines called production clowns. These might involve dozens of clowns emerging from impossibly small cars, constructing and destroying elaborate stage pieces, or creating visual spectacles that filled the entire circus ring. European circus traditions developed their own approaches to clowning. Switzerland's Grock became one of the most celebrated clowns of the early 20th century, combining musical virtuosity with physical comedy. His act involved playing multiple instruments while encountering endless comic obstacles, demonstrating that clowning at its highest level required genuine artistic skill. Grock performed for royalty and became wealthy enough to retire to his own castle, proving that clowns could achieve both artistic respect and commercial success. The training required to become a professional circus clown was extensive and demanding. Aspiring clowns needed physical skills including acrobatics, juggling, and stunt work. They needed performance skills including timing, improvisation, and audience awareness. They needed technical skills like makeup application and costume maintenance. Many learned through apprenticeship, joining circus families where clowning knowledge passed from generation to generation. The golden age of circus clowns, roughly from 1850 to 1950, created an image of the clown that still dominates popular imagination. Colorful costume, painted face, red nose, oversized shoes, and an association with childhood entertainment. Circus clowns became symbols of innocent joy, figures who existed to make children laugh and help families forget their troubles for a few hours. This idealized image, while powerful, would eventually create problems as cultural attitudes toward clowns began to shift. When the lights dimmed in movie theaters during the early 20th century, and flickering black and white images appeared on screens, a new form of clowning was born, one that would elevate physical comedy to heights that even the greatest circus performers had never achieved. Silent film removed the clown's voice, but gave them something more powerful: the ability to have their performances captured, preserved, and shared with audiences around the world. A pratfall performed in a Hollywood studio could make people laugh in Paris, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires. The silent film clowns became the first truly global comedy stars. Charlie Chaplin stands as perhaps the most iconic figure in this pantheon. His character, the tramp, with the signature bowler hat, too small jacket, oversized pants, enormous shoes, and bamboo cane, became one of the most recognizable images in world culture. The tramp was a direct descendant of circus tramp clowns, but Chaplin elevated the character into something approaching high art. His films combined virtuosic physical comedy with genuine emotional depth, creating stories that could make audiences laugh and cry within moments of each other. Chaplin's genius lay in his understanding that comedy works best when it emerges from character and situation, rather than random gags. His films depicted the tramp navigating a modern world that seemed designed to humiliate and defeat him. Yet his character maintained dignity and even nobility despite constant setbacks. In The Gold Rush, the tramp boils and eats his own shoe when starving, transforming desperation into an elaborate dining ritual complete with the shoelaces eaten like spaghetti. It's simultaneously hilarious and heartbreaking, the essence of great clowning. The physical precision required for Chaplin's comedy was extraordinary. He would perform the same gag dozens of times to get it exactly right, understanding that comedy depends on perfect timing. A pratfall had to look spontaneous while being carefully choreographed. A facial expression had to register clearly on camera while appearing natural. The walk of the tramp, that distinctive shuffle with toes turned out, looked effortless but was the result of endless practice and refinement. Buster Keaton brought a different sensibility to silent comedy, one that emphasized stoic resilience in the face of cosmic indifference. Keaton's character never smiled, earning him the nickname the Great Stone Face. Yet his films are masterpieces of physical comedy and visual invention. Where Chaplin's comedy emerged from character and emotion, Keaton's arose from his relationship with the physical world, which seemed perpetually committed to his destruction. Keaton's most famous sequences involve elaborate physical stunts that seem impossible even today. In Steamboat Bill, Jr., a building facade falls on him, with Keaton standing precisely where an open window frame passes over him. A stunt with zero margin for error that was performed for real. In The General, he performs acrobatics on a moving train, leaping between cars, running along the roof, and executing pratfalls that look casual but required absolute physical mastery. The philosophical depth of Keaton's comedy often goes unappreciated. His characters face absurd obstacles, tornadoes, collapsing buildings, runaway trains, with unflappable determination. They represent a particularly modern form of heroism, the stubborn refusal to be defeated by a universe that seems actively hostile. Keaton's clown doesn't cry or complain, he simply adapts and persists. There's something profoundly moving about watching his small figure continue struggling against impossible odds with no assurance of success. Harold Lloyd created yet another variation on the silent film clown with his character, Glasses. An optimistic everyman whose enthusiasm and confidence constantly led him into danger. Lloyd specialized in thrill comedy, placing his character in genuinely dangerous situations, and then finding humor in the tension between peril and persistence. His most famous image, hanging from a clock face high above a city street in Safety Last, has become one of cinema's most iconic moments. These silent comedians shared certain characteristics that defined their art. They all insisted on performing their own stunts, believing that authenticity was essential to comedy. They all possessed extraordinary physical control, having trained in vaudeville, circus, or music halls where survival required genuine skill. They all understood that silence forced them to communicate purely through physical expression, making every gesture, expression, and movement meaningful. The influence of silent film clowns extended far beyond entertainment. Avant-garde artists and intellectuals recognized these performers as genuine artists working in a new medium. The French Dadaists and Surrealists celebrated Chaplin as one of them, seeing in his films a critique of industrial society and bourgeois values. The Russian filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein analyzed Chaplin's work in theoretical essays, arguing that his comedy achieved the kind of visual poetry that Eisenstein sought in his own serious films. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, though they made both silent and sound films, perfected a partnership that became the template for comedy duos. Laurel, thin and childlike, played the well-meaning fool whose attempts to help always made situations worse. Hardy, rotund and pompous, played the supposed authority figure whose dignity was perpetually undermined by his partner's incompetence and his own limitations. Their relationship demonstrated that clowning could explore complex dynamics of friendship, frustration, affection, and mutual dependency. The technical innovations developed by silent film comedians influenced cinema as a whole. They pioneered camera techniques, editing patterns, and narrative structures that filmmakers still use today. The chase sequence, the perfectly timed gag, the use of props as characters in their own right. All were refined by these comedy pioneers and then adopted by dramatic filmmakers. When sound came to cinema in the late 1920s, many predicted it would kill physical comedy. If actors could talk, why would they need to fall down? The opposite proved true. The best silent comedians adapted, incorporating dialogue while maintaining their physical virtuosity. The Marx Brothers added anarchic verbal wit to physical chaos. Laurel and Hardy's voices enhanced their characters without diminishing their physical comedy. The legacy of silent film clowns persists in surprising places. Modern physical comedians from Jack Taddy to Jim Carrey acknowledge their debt to these pioneers. Animation borrowed their techniques. Watch any cartoon and you'll see Chaplin's timing, Keaton's physics-defying stunts, Lloyd's thrill comedy. Even contemporary action films owe something to these performers who proved that carefully choreographed physical performance could create compelling cinema. Perhaps most importantly, these silent film clowns demonstrated that clowning could be high art without ceasing to be popular entertainment. Their films were box office hits that also impressed artists and intellectuals. They proved that making people laugh didn't require pandering to the lowest common denominator, that comedy could be both sophisticated and accessible, that the clown's painted face could express truths about human experience as profound as any dramatic performance. Picture a suburban backyard on a Saturday afternoon in 1965. Balloons tied to the fence, posts bounce in the breeze. Children in party clothes cluster around a folding table covered with cake and ice cream. A station wagon pulls into the driveway, and out steps a figure in a rainbow wig, red nose, and oversized polka-dot costume. The birthday party clown has arrived, and for the next hour, this modest backyard will become the center of childhood magic. The post-World War II boom in suburban America created a new cultural phenomenon, the professional birthday party clown. Middle-class families with disposable income, separate houses with yards, and a culture increasingly focused on child-centered experiences created a perfect market for affordable entertainment. Party clowns represented a domesticated version of circus grandeur, bringing a taste of the big top to neighborhoods where the actual circus might pass through only once a year, if at all. The economics of party clowning made it accessible in ways that previous clowning traditions never were. You didn't need years of training at circus academies. You didn't need to join traveling troupes or commit to a performer's lifestyle. Anyone with basic skills in balloon animals, simple magic tricks, face painting, and the ability to engage children could become a party clown. The barrier to entry was low, which meant thousands of people entered the profession. Some talented, some enthusiastic, some desperately trying to make ends meet between other jobs. Bozo the Clown became the template for American birthday party entertainment. Created by Alan Livingston in 1946, Bozo began as a character in a children's record series, but his true cultural impact came from television. Capitol Records franchised the character, allowing local TV stations across America to produce their own Bozo's Circus programs with local performers playing Bozo. At the height of Bozo's popularity in the 1960s, there were Bozos performing in dozens of markets, each becoming local celebrities. The franchise model proved brilliant from a business perspective. It created a recognizable national character while allowing local customization. Children grew up watching their local Bozo, attending his live appearances, and requesting Bozo-themed birthday parties. The economic model, licensing a character and format, while letting local performers and entrepreneurs handle actual production. Would influence everything from fast food franchises to modern influencer brands. The role of party clown existed in an odd social space. These performers were welcomed into people's homes and trusted with their children, yet they were also service workers paid to provide entertainment. The relationship combined intimacy with formality, trust with transaction. Parents hired clowns to create magical experiences for their children, while often viewing the performers themselves with a mixture of appreciation and mild condescension. The skill set required for party clowning evolved to meet suburban expectations. Balloon twisting became essential. The ability to transform long balloons into dogs, swords, flowers, and increasingly elaborate creations. Simple magic tricks that could be performed in living rooms and backyards replaced the elaborate illusions of stage magicians. Face painting emerged as a lucrative add-on service. The successful party clown needed to be part entertainer, part child psychologist, and part small business operator. Party clowning also developed its own informal codes and traditions. Clowns created personas, sparkles, giggles, buttons, often choosing names that sounded cheerful and unthreatening. They developed routines that could scale from small, intimate gatherings to larger events at schools and community centers. They learned to handle crying children, navigate family dynamics, and maintain energy through multiple performances on busy weekend days. The emergence of clown alley networks, informal communities where party clowns shared tips, techniques, and sometimes costumes and props, created a subculture that existed beneath mainstream awareness. These communities held conventions, published newsletters, and maintained the folk traditions of clowning even as the profession became increasingly commercialized. Some party clowns took their craft seriously, studying classic clowning techniques and seeing themselves as part of a tradition stretching back to court jesters and Commedia dell'Arte. Others viewed it purely as a side hustle, a way to make money on weekends with minimal investment. The 1970s and 1980s represented the golden age of party clowning in America. Ronald McDonald became one of the most recognizable advertising characters in the world, associating clowns with childhood happiness and family-friendly entertainment. Shopping malls regularly featured clowns for special events and holiday celebrations. Companies hired clowns for corporate family days and promotional events. The clown became synonymous with wholesome family entertainment. Children's television expanded the clown's cultural footprint. Captain Kangaroo, though not technically a clown, embodied the gentle, child-focused entertainment that characterized this era. Local TV stations across America featured clown hosts for afternoon children's programming. These TV clowns became trusted figures who taught children lessons about sharing, kindness, and creativity, while also selling toys and breakfast cereals. The professionalization of party entertainment created supporting industries. Companies specialized in clown supplies, wigs, noses, oversized shoes, and costumes in every color combination imaginable. Books and videos promised to teach anyone the secrets of professional clowning. Clown colleges and workshops offered training for those who wanted to take the profession seriously. The World Clown Association, founded in 1980, provided networking and education for thousands of members. But this golden age contained the seeds of what would come next. The ubiquity of clowns meant that quality varied wildly. Some party clowns were talented performers who brought genuine joy to children's celebrations. Others were people in bad costumes going through the motions, making children uncomfortable rather than happy. The market saturation meant that clowns appeared in contexts that diluted their impact. Every grand opening, every sale event, every minor local celebration seemed to require a clown, whether appropriate or not. The economics of party clowning also created challenges. As more people entered the profession, rates stayed relatively low. Most party clowns earned modest incomes that required supplementing with other work. The seasonal nature of the business, busy weekends during birthday season, slow periods during holidays and summer vacations, made consistent income difficult. Insurance became expensive as liability concerns grew. The work was physically demanding, wearing heavy costumes and makeup in outdoor summer heat, managing excited children for hours, loading and unloading equipment multiple times per day. Yet for many performers, party clowning provided something beyond income. It offered opportunities for creativity and connection. Watching a shy child's face light up with delight, making a special birthday unforgettable, bringing laughter to families during difficult times. These moments gave the work meaning beyond mere transaction. Some party clowns spoke of their role with genuine reverence, seeing themselves as creators of joy and guardians of childhood wonder. The birthday party clown represented a uniquely American adaptation of clowning tradition, democratic, commercial, and domestic. It brought performance art into private spaces, made entertainment accessible to middle-class families, and created a new category of semi-professional artist. The party clown wasn't trying to make artistic statements or preserve ancient traditions. They were simply trying to make children happy, one backyard party at a time. This commercialization and domestication of clowning would have profound consequences. By making clowns ubiquitous and associating them primarily with children's entertainment, American culture stripped away much of the complexity that had characterized clowning throughout history. The clown became a simple figure, friendly, funny, safe. The darker aspects of the clown tradition, the fool's privilege to speak uncomfortable truths, the melancholy beneath the painted smile, the connection between comedy and tragedy, faded from popular consciousness. When cultural attitudes toward clowns began to shift in the 1980s and 1990s, the birthday party clown would find themselves in an unexpected and uncomfortable position. The very domestication that had made party clowning successful would make individual clowns vulnerable to changing perceptions. The friendly neighborhood party clown, arriving in their aging station wagon with a bag of balloon animals, would discover that the painted smile that once signified innocent joy had taken on darker associations in the popular imagination. Step into a psychology laboratory where researchers are monitoring brain activity while subjects view images of clowns. The results are fascinating and complex. Some subjects show activation in brain regions associated with pleasure, humor, and positive emotion. Others display heightened activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, along with areas associated with threat detection and anxiety. The same stimulus produces opposite neurological responses. This isn't a flaw in the experiment, it's a window into one of the most intriguing questions in psychology. Why do some people love clowns while others fear them? The human response to clowns taps into deep psychological mechanisms that evolved long before circuses or birthday parties existed. Our brains are exquisitely tuned to recognize human faces and to read subtle emotional cues from facial expressions. This skill is so fundamental to human survival and social functioning that we develop it in infancy. Babies prefer looking at faces over any other visual stimulus. We're hardwired to notice faces in clouds, toast, and random patterns, a phenomenon called pareidolia. But clown makeup presents the brain with a puzzle. It's clearly a face, triggering all our face recognition circuitry. Yet it's also clearly wrong. The proportions are distorted. The mouth too large, the eyes too emphasized, the overall features exaggerated beyond normal human variation. The colors are wrong. Skin isn't white, lips aren't that red, hair doesn't naturally grow in rainbow colors. This creates what psychologists call the uncanny valley effect. The uncanny valley concept, first proposed by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in 1970, suggests that as artificial entities become more human-like, our emotional response becomes increasingly positive. but only up to a point. When something is almost but not quite human, when it's familiar enough to trigger recognition but wrong enough to signal abnormality, our response flips to discomfort or revulsion. Clown faces sit precisely in this zone for many people. Research into facial recognition reveals why clown makeup can be unsettling. Our brains use specific features to identify faces and read emotions. The spacing between eyes, the shape of the mouth, the movement of facial muscles. Clown makeup disrupts these cues while still maintaining enough facial structure to activate our face processing systems. The result is cognitive dissonance. Our brains recognize a face, but can't properly process the emotional information that faces normally convey. The fixed smile of clown makeup creates particular psychological tension. Genuine smiles involve not just the mouth, but also the eyes and other facial muscles in a complex, coordinated pattern. Painted smiles lack this coordination. The mouth area signals happiness, but the eyes might convey different emotions. This mismatch between facial regions triggers subtle discomfort because it suggests emotional dishonesty or hidden intentions. We evolved to distrust people whose facial expressions don't match their supposed emotions, viewing such mismatches as signs of deception or threat. Masks in general occupy a complex space in human psychology and culture. Throughout history, masks have been used for transformation, disguise, ritual, and performance. They allow the wearer to become someone else while also creating distance and mystery. The mask conceals identity while projecting a new persona. This duality, revealing and concealing simultaneously, gives masks psychological power. In many cultures, masks represent connections to the spirit world or supernatural forces. Masked figures in rituals aren't simply wearing costumes. They're understood to embody other beings or energies. This association between masks and transformation, between the hidden and revealed, between ordinary and extraordinary reality, persists in our modern relationship with clowns even when we're not consciously aware of these cultural resonances. The psychology of humor itself illuminates why clowns can be both funny and frightening. Humor theorists have identified several mechanisms that produce laughter. Superiority theory suggests we laugh when we feel superior to others, hence why pratfalls are funny when they happen to someone else. Incongruity theory proposes that humor arises from violated expectations. We laugh when situations don't unfold as predicted. Relief theory argues that laughter releases psychological tension. Clowns employ all these mechanisms. Their incompetence makes us feel superior. Their unexpected behaviors violate our predictions. Their presence creates and releases tension. But these same mechanisms can produce anxiety instead of laughter when the context shifts. Unexpected behavior from a clown at a circus is funny. Unexpected behavior from a clown appearing unexpectedly in a dark parking lot is terrifying. Cultural conditioning plays a significant role in how we respond to clowns. Children in contemporary Western cultures are taught that clowns are funny and friendly, associating them with parties, circuses, and positive experiences. This cultural training usually overrides any instinctive discomfort with the unusual appearance. But if early experiences with clowns are negative, a too aggressive party clown, a frightening media portrayal, or simply encountering a clown at a developmental stage when stranger anxiety is high, the cultural conditioning can fail, leaving only the underlying discomfort. The phenomenon of coulrophobia, the fear of clowns, has been recognized by psychologists as a legitimate specific phobia. While exact prevalence is difficult to determine, surveys suggest that up to 12% of adults in Western countries experience at least mild discomfort around clowns, with smaller percentages experiencing genuine phobia. Interestingly, coulrophobia appears to be more common in contemporary society than in earlier eras, suggesting that cultural factors have shifted how we perceive and respond to clowns. Childhood developmental psychology offers additional insights. Young children go through stages of stranger anxiety and magical thinking. A toddler might be frightened by anyone who looks unusual or unfamiliar. A preschooler might believe that someone who looks scary actually is dangerous. If a child encounters a clown during these sensitive developmental windows and has a negative experience, the association between clowns and fear can become deeply embedded. The role of media in shaping perceptions of clowns cannot be overstated. For generations, clowns in media were depicted as purely positive figures, entertainers who existed to make children happy. But beginning in the 1980s, media portrayals shifted dramatically. Horror films, true crime stories, and dark psychological thrillers began featuring evil clowns as villains. These portrayals exploited the psychological ambiguity of the clown figure, using the familiar to create unfamiliar horror. Neurological research using fMRI scans has shown that viewing images of clowns activates brain regions associated with both threat detection and humor processing. This dual activation helps explain the mixed responses people have. The brain is simultaneously trying to determine if the clown is funny or dangerous, friendly or threatening. This ambiguity creates cognitive load. The brain has to work harder to categorize and respond to the stimulus. The psychology of trust and stranger danger intersects with clown perception in interesting ways. We teach children to be wary of strangers who seem too friendly or who try to lure them with entertainment or treats. Yet clowns are strangers in costume who approach children with offers of entertainment. The contradiction between safety teachings and the cultural expectation that clowns are safe creates potential psychological conflict. Laughter itself is a complex psychological and physiological response. It involves coordinated activation of multiple brain regions, release of endorphins and other neurochemicals, and distinctive respiratory and vocal patterns. Laughter serves social bonding functions, communicates non-threatening intentions, and provides physiological stress relief. But laughter can also be nervous or anxious. We sometimes laugh when uncomfortable. The laughter that clowns evoke may contain elements of both genuine amusement and anxiety management. The concept of benign violation in humor theory provides another framework for understanding clown psychology. This theory suggests that humor requires both a violation of expectations or norms and a sense that the violation is ultimately safe or benign. Clowns violate norms of appearance and behavior, but in the right context, circus, party, clearly performance space, the violation feels benign. Change the context, and the violation no longer feels safe, transforming amusement into apprehension. The transformation of the clown from beloved entertainer to figure of fear represents one of the most dramatic shifts in cultural symbolism in modern history. To understand how this happened, we need to journey into the darker corners of the 20th century, where painted smiles began to conceal genuine malevolence, and where the clown's mask became a symbol not of innocent joy, but of something far more disturbing. The first major crack in the clown's wholesome image came in 1978 with the arrest of John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was a pillar of his suburban Chicago community, a Democratic Party precinct captain, a volunteer who dressed as Pogo the Clown to entertain sick children in hospitals and perform at charity events. He posed for photographs with political figures and seemed to embody civic responsibility. The revelation that he had sexually assaulted and murdered at least 33 young men and boys sent shockwaves through American culture. What made Gacy particularly disturbing wasn't just his crimes, but the stark contrast between his public persona and private actions. Here was someone who literally painted on a friendly face to gain trust and access to vulnerable people while harboring monstrous intentions. The image of Gacy in his pogo costume, with painted smile and cheerful demeanor, became seared into public consciousness. After Gacy, the clown could never be simply innocent again. Media coverage of the Gacy case emphasized his clown persona in ways that criminologists later criticized as potentially misleading. Gacy's clowning wasn't directly connected to his crimes, but the visual symbolism proved irresistible to journalists and public imagination. The juxtaposition of the clown costume with horrific crimes created a narrative too symbolically powerful to resist. The clown as trusted entertainer and the clown as predator became fused in popular consciousness. Horror fiction and film immediately seized on this cultural shift. Stephen King's 1986 novel, it featured Pennywise the dancing clown, a malevolent entity that took the form of a clown to lure and kill children. King tapped into emerging anxieties about clowns while also recognizing something deeper. The clown's ambiguity, its position between laughter and tears, comedy and tragedy, made it a perfect vessel for exploring fundamental fears. The 1990 television miniseries adaptation of It introduced Pennywise to millions of viewers, many of whom were children or teenagers. Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise was simultaneously entertaining and terrifying, creating a cultural touchstone that defined scary clowns for a generation. People who saw the miniseries as children often report that it fundamentally changed how they perceived clowns, transforming birthday party entertainers into potential threats. Other horror films followed, each adding to the growing cultural association between clowns and danger. Killer Clones from Outer Space, Clown House, and later films like Stitches and the Terrifier series exploited and amplified fears about clowns. The horror genre recognized that clowns offered unique advantages as villains. They could appear in public without arousing immediate suspicion. Their exaggerated features made them visually distinctive, and the violation of expectations, the friendly clown revealed as killer, provided built-in dramatic tension. The spread of internet culture in the late 1990s and early 2000s accelerated the transformation. Creepypasta stories featuring evil clowns proliferated on forums and websites. Disturbing clown images became popular in online horror communities. The anonymity and reach of the internet meant that scary clown content could spread globally and reach audiences, including young people who might never have encountered such material through traditional media. Video games embraced the evil clown trope. The Twisted Metal series featured Sweet Tooth, a killer clown driving an ice cream truck. Batman, Arkham games brought the Joker, technically not a clown but sharing much of the aesthetic, to life in frightening detail. These interactive experiences made the scary clown personally threatening in ways that passive media consumption couldn't achieve. In 2014, the television series American Horror Story Freak Show featured Twisty the Clown, a tragic but terrifying figure whose storyline explored the origins of a killer clown while depicting graphic violence. The show's popularity and critical acclaim demonstrated that mainstream entertainment had fully embraced the dark clown archetype. Twisty became a popular Halloween costume, further normalizing the association between clowns and horror. The phenomenon reached a bizarre climax in 2016 with the creepy clown sightings that spread across North America and Europe. People dressed as menacing clowns began appearing in public spaces, lurking near woods, standing silently on street corners, approaching people in threatening ways. While most incidents involved pranks or hoaxes, the widespread nature of the phenomenon suggested something deeper at work in collective psychology. The 2016 clown panic revealed how thoroughly cultural perceptions had shifted. Schools banned clown costumes. Police departments issued warnings about clown sightings. Professional clowns reported significant declines in business as parents decided not to hire clowns for children's parties. The World Clown Association released statements trying to distinguish professional entertainers from the menacing figures appearing in parks and parking lots, but the damage to the clown's reputation was profound. Psychological explanations for the clown panic varied. Some researchers saw it as mass hysteria amplified by social media, where reports of sightings in one location inspired copycat incidents elsewhere. Others viewed it as an expression of broader social anxieties about safety, strangers, and hidden threats. The timing, during a particularly contentious U.S. election season characterized by political division and cultural conflict, suggested that the clown panic might have been channeling anxieties that had nothing directly to do with actual clowns. The release of the 2017 film adaptation of It came at the perfect moment to capitalize on renewed interest in scary clowns. The film became a massive commercial success, introducing Pennywise to a new generation while cementing the association between clowns and horror in popular culture. The film's success spawned a sequel and influenced countless other productions, seeking to exploit the profitable scary clown subgenre. Real working clowns found themselves in an impossible position. Many had spent decades or entire careers bringing joy to children and families, viewing their work as a calling or art form. Suddenly, they were associated with violence, predation, and horror. Some retired from clowning altogether. Others adapted by emphasizing other aspects of their performance, calling themselves entertainers rather than clowns. Some fought back through advocacy organizations, trying to reclaim the clown's positive image. The transformation wasn't total or universal. Circus clowns, particularly those working with prestigious companies like Cirque du Soleil, maintained positive reputations by emphasizing artistry and sophistication over traditional clown imagery. Hospital clowns and therapeutic clowns continued their work with support from medical professionals who understood their value. In many non-Western cultures, traditional clowning remained relatively unaffected by the moral panic consuming North American and European perceptions. Yet the shift in Western popular culture was undeniable. The clown had become what semioticians call a contested symbol, one whose meaning was actively debated and no longer settled. For older generations, clowns might still evoke childhood parties and circus memories. For younger people raised on horror films and internet creepypasta, clowns were more likely to trigger anxiety than joy. The same image produced opposite reactions depending on cultural context and individual experience. This transformation reveals something important about how cultural symbols work. Icons don't have inherent fixed meanings. Their significance emerges from collective agreement and can shift when narratives change. The clown's journey from entertainer to monster happened not because clowns themselves changed, but because the stories we told about them did. Media representations, amplified by social media and collective anxiety, created new associations that overrode decades of positive imagery. Travel to the high mountains of Nepal, and you might encounter traveling performers called gain, wandering minstrels who combine music, comedy, and social commentary. Journey to the markets of Mexico, and you'll find payasos, clowns whose performances blend indigenous traditions with Spanish colonial influences and contemporary urban culture. Cross to West Africa, and you'll meet storytellers who embody the trickster figure Anansi, using humor and cunning to convey moral lessons. The world's clowning traditions are as diverse as human culture itself, each reflecting unique values, histories, and understandings of humor's role in society. Japanese theatrical traditions developed the kyogen, comic interludes performed between serious no-dramas. Kyogen actors, wearing minimal or no makeup, portray ordinary people, servants, merchants, farmers, whose everyday concerns and foibles provide humorous contrast to No's austere spiritual themes. The humor is gentle and observational, finding comedy in human nature without cruelty. Kyogen reflects Japanese aesthetic values that appreciate subtlety and find beauty in simplicity, creating comedy that feels intimate even in formal theatrical settings. The Chinese opera tradition includes distinctive clown characters called chu, identifiable by white patches around their eyes and noses. These characters serve multiple functions within opera narratives, providing comic relief, yes, but also often representing common people whose practical wisdom contrasts with the nobility's formality. True characters might be clever servants who outsmart their masters, or ordinary citizens whose straightforward observations puncture official pretensions. The make-up tradition extends back centuries, with specific designs indicating character types and social positions. Indian classical theater developed the Videshaka character, a Brahmin clown who combines high caste status with deliberately foolish behavior. The Videshaka serves as companion and confidant to the hero, but his commentary often undercuts heroic pretensions with earthy observations and self-interested concerns. This character type allowed Sanskrit drama to incorporate social criticism and humor while maintaining respect for narrative convention. The Videshaka represents a distinctly Indian approach to foolery that acknowledges the gap between spiritual ideals and human reality. Indonesian shadow puppet theater, or wayang kulit, features clown servants called punakawan who guide audiences through complex mythological narratives. These characters speak in everyday language rather than the elevated poetic forms used by noble characters, making philosophical and moral points accessible to ordinary people. Punakawan can comment on contemporary politics and social issues while ostensibly discussing ancient myths, giving them a role similar to medieval European jesters, speaking truth through the protection of their fool status. Native American traditions developed contraries or sacred clowns who played crucial roles in spiritual and social life. These figures did everything backward, riding horses facing the wrong direction, saying the opposite of what they meant, wearing winter clothes in summer. Among Plains tribes, the Heyoka clown was someone who had received thunder visions, giving them spiritual power that manifested through contrary behavior. Sacred clowns could break taboos, mock serious ceremonies, and behave outrageously, but their behavior served important functions. It reminded communities that reality is more complex than it appears, that rigid adherence to rules can become its own form of foolishness, and that laughter and irreverence have sacred dimensions. The Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest developed elaborate clown traditions that continue today. During ceremonial dances, clowns appear wearing distinctive striped body paint and engaging in apparently chaotic behavior. They might interrupt serious dances, mock participants, or engage in crude comedy. But their role is deeply serious. They teach proper behavior by demonstrating improper behavior, they test the boundaries of acceptable conduct, and they connect the community with powerful spiritual forces through laughter and disorder. These clowns sometimes criticize community members who have behaved selfishly or violated social norms, using humor to enforce cultural values without direct confrontation. Mexican payaso traditions blend indigenous performance heritage with Spanish colonial theatrical forms and modern mass media influences. Street performers called payasos callejeros work in markets and plazas, often combining juggling, physical comedy, and satirical commentary on politics and daily life. Their humor can be biting and bawdy, reflecting working-class perspectives and economic struggles. The character of Cantinflas, created by comedian Mario Morno, became an iconic Mexican cultural figure, a fast-talking pelado, urban poor character, whose verbal gymnastics and underdog cleverness made him beloved across Latin America and beyond. Brazilian theater developed its own clown traditions, particularly through the palhaço figure. Brazilian clowns often incorporate elements from African performance traditions brought by enslaved people, creating distinctive styles that blend European circus traditions with African rhythms, movement vocabulary, and spiritual practices. The palhaço tradition has influenced contemporary physical theater and clowning schools throughout South America, creating a uniquely Brazilian approach to comedy that emphasizes bodily expression and social engagement. Sub-Saharan African cultures developed rich traditions of masked performance and trickster narratives. The Yoruba people of Nigeria celebrate the trickster deity Esweligba, a figure who mediates between human and divine realms through cleverness and chaos. Stories of Esweligba, like those of Anansi in West African and Caribbean cultures, use humor and trickery to convey moral lessons and explain how the world came to be as it is. These trickster figures aren't simply comedians. They're cosmologically important beings whose actions shape reality itself. Arab and Middle Eastern traditions developed the Mada and Hakawati, storytellers who combined narrative with comedy, music, and social commentary. These performers worked in coffee houses and public squares, entertaining audiences while also serving as informal journalists and critics who could comment on politics and social issues through the protective medium of entertainment. The tradition continues in modified forms today, adapting to modern media while maintaining essential elements of the storytelling and comedic heritage. What unites these diverse global traditions is the recognition that humor serves essential social and spiritual functions. Clowns and fools provide safety valves for social tension, allowing communities to laugh at themselves and their leaders. They serve as social critics who can say what others cannot, using the protection of their fool status to speak uncomfortable truths. They remind communities that order and chaos, sense and nonsense, exist in constant interplay. They connect the everyday world with realms of magic, spirit, and possibility. These traditions also reveal that what seems universal about clowning, the use of humor, physical comedy, and exaggerated behavior, manifests in culturally specific ways. What's funny, appropriate, or meaningful in one culture might be confusing or offensive in another. The Japanese appreciation for subtle comedy differs dramatically from the broad physical humor of Italian commedia. The sacred role of Native American contraries contrasts with the secular entertainment focus of modern Western party clowns. As globalization spreads Western popular culture worldwide, traditional clowning forms face both challenges and opportunities. Some traditions decline as younger generations prefer modern entertainment media. Others adapt, incorporating contemporary references while maintaining core elements of their heritage. Still others experience revival as communities recognize the value of preserving cultural practices that might otherwise disappear. Contemporary circus arts have become increasingly international, with performers from diverse backgrounds sharing techniques and traditions. This cross-cultural exchange creates new hybrid forms while also raising questions about cultural appropriation and authenticity. When is borrowing from another culture's clown tradition a respectful exchange, and when does it become exploitation? These questions don't have simple answers, but reflect the ongoing evolution of clowning in a globalized world. Global clowning traditions remind us that the impulse toward foolery, toward using humor and play to navigate human existence, transcends any single culture. Every society has found its own ways to honor the fool, the trickster, the comedian who helps communities understand themselves. The specific forms vary. The makeup, costumes, performance contexts, and social roles differ dramatically, but the underlying recognition remains constant. Humans need figures who can make us laugh, challenge our assumptions, and remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. In a contemporary theater in Paris, performers from Cirque du Soleil execute impossible acrobatics, while a clown character weaves through the action, creating moments of humor and humanity that ground the spectacular in the relatable. In a community center in Brooklyn, aspiring clowns study the techniques of physical theater, learning to create comedy from genuine emotion rather than relying on props and pratfalls. In hospitals, refugee camps, and nursing homes worldwide, therapeutic clowns bring moments of joy to people facing profound challenges. The art of clowning hasn't disappeared. It's evolving, adapting to contemporary culture, while maintaining connections to ancient traditions. Cirque du Soleil, founded in 1984 by former street performers in Quebec, revolutionized how audiences think about circus arts. Their productions elevated circus from popular entertainment to high art, incorporating sophisticated lighting, music, and theatrical elements. Within this elevated framework, clowns play essential roles, not as comic relief interrupting the main action, but as emotional centers that give meaning to the spectacular physical feats surrounding them. Cirque clowns often work without traditional makeup, relying instead on expressive physicality and genuine emotional connection with audiences. They might be sad, confused, overwhelmed by the grandeur around them, emotions that audiences recognize and relate to. This approach acknowledges something that traditional circus sometimes missed. The most powerful comedy emerges from authentic human experience rather than artificial gags and routines. Contemporary clown schools have emerged as centers for artistic innovation and traditional preservation. The École Nationale des Arts du Cirque in France, the Circus Space in London, and the San Francisco Circus Center in America train performers in techniques that blend classical clowning with contemporary physical theater, dance, and performance art. Students learn not just how to execute pratfalls and juggling routines, but how to create compelling characters, develop original material, and understand clowning as a legitimate art form with its own aesthetics and ethics. These schools often emphasize the concept of the clown as a theatrical device rather than a costumed character. Students work to discover their personal clown, the vulnerable, authentic aspects of themselves that can create genuine connection with audiences. This approach, influenced by teachers like Jacques Lecoq, focuses on finding comedy in real human behavior and emotion, rather than imposing external tricks and techniques. Street performance has experienced a renaissance in cities worldwide, with talented clowns creating sophisticated acts that draw crowds in public spaces. These performers must capture attention in environments filled with distractions, holding audiences without the formal constraints of theater. The best street clowns create moments of magic in ordinary urban spaces, transforming sidewalks and squares into temporary theaters, where strangers become communities united in laughter. The economics of street performance create interesting dynamics. Performers work for tips, meaning their income depends entirely on their ability to engage and delight audiences. This creates pressure toward excellence. Mediocre performances don't generate income, but it also provides freedom to experiment and develop original material without the commercial pressures of formal theater. Many renowned clowns developed their skills busking on streets before moving to theaters and circuses. Digital media has created new possibilities and challenges for clowning. YouTube and social media platforms allow clowns to reach global audiences without traditional gatekeepers like circuses or television networks. Physical comedians and character performers have built substantial followings by posting videos of their work. This democratization means more people can attempt careers in clowning, but it also means increased competition for attention in an oversaturated media landscape. The challenge for digital clowning lies in translating an art form built on live presence and audience interaction into recorded media. The magic of clowning often emerges from the specific energy of live performance, the way a clown reads and responds to a particular audience in a particular moment. Videos can capture technical skill, but sometimes miss the aliveness that makes clowning compelling in person. Some contemporary clowns have embraced technology as part of their art. Performers incorporate projection, video, and interactive digital elements into live shows. Others use social media to develop characters and build relationships with audiences between performances. The most successful adaptations find ways to use technology while maintaining the human connection that remains central to clowning. The scary clown phenomenon has forced professional clowns to reconsider their approach. Many have moved away from traditional red nose and rainbow wig aesthetics, recognizing that these visuals now carry cultural baggage that can undermine their work. Some emphasize their identity as physical theater performers or circus artists rather than clowns. Others have leaned into more sophisticated character work that creates distinct personas rather than relying on generic clown imagery. Hospital clowning and therapeutic applications represent one of clowning's most promising futures. As evidence accumulates for the therapeutic benefits of laughter and play, more medical institutions and social service organizations incorporate professional clowns into their programs. This work requires serious training and brings genuine value to vulnerable populations, creating career paths for clowns that offer both personal meaning and financial stability. The professionalization of clowning continues through organizations like the World Clown Association, which provides education, networking, and advocacy for performers. These organizations work to maintain standards, share techniques, and protect the reputation of professional clowns. They've had to navigate the challenging cultural landscape where clowns are simultaneously objects of fear and subjects of legitimate art. Some contemporary artists have used clowning to explore serious social and political themes. Performances addressing poverty, war, immigration, and social justice incorporate clown techniques not for easy laughs, but to make difficult subjects accessible and to find hope and humanity in dark circumstances. This approach recovers something from historical clowning traditions: the fool's ability to speak truth through comedy, to address serious matters in ways that direct discourse sometimes cannot. The future of clowning likely involves continued diversification. Traditional circus clowns will maintain their niche in family entertainment. Therapeutic clowns will expand their presence in medical and social service settings. Artistic clowns will push boundaries in experimental theater and performance art. Street performers will continue adapting their work to urban environments and digital platforms. Each of these paths represents a legitimate continuation of clowning tradition, adapted to contemporary contexts and needs. Climate change and global challenges may create new roles for clowns. As communities face displacement, disaster, and uncertainty, the therapeutic and community-building functions of clowning become increasingly valuable. Organizations bringing clowns to crisis zones demonstrate that laughter and play remain essential human needs even, perhaps especially, in the darkest times. The question of what makes someone a real clown becomes increasingly complex in this diverse landscape. Is it the red nose and costume, the training in specific techniques, the ability to make people laugh, the commitment to bringing joy to others? Perhaps clowning, like all living art forms, resists simple definition and continues to evolve as practitioners find new ways to embody its essential qualities. What seems certain is that humans will continue needing clowns in some form. We need figures who can make us laugh at ourselves, who can find joy in difficulty, who can speak truth through absurdity, who can remind us that life's most serious moments coexist with its most ridiculous. The specific forms clowning takes will change, they always have, but the impulse it serves remains fundamental to human experience. Today's young people studying clowning carry forward traditions stretching back thousands of years, while also creating something new. They're learning ancient techniques while developing contemporary material. They're honoring the clowns who came before, while acknowledging the cultural complexities surrounding clown imagery today. They're preparing to bring laughter to a world that desperately needs it, one performance at a time. As we reach the end of our journey through the painted faces and hidden hearts of clowning history, we've traveled from ancient Egyptian court performers to birthday party entertainers in suburban backyards. We've witnessed the art form's evolution through Commedia dell'Arte and Circus golden ages, through silent film brilliance and cultural transformation. We've explored the psychology that makes clowns both beloved and feared, and discovered how global cultures have created their own unique traditions of foolery. The story of clowns reflects something essential about human nature: our need for laughter, our hunger for connection, our wisdom in recognizing that the fool sometimes sees most clearly. They remind us that beneath the makeup, behind the mask, the clown's true face is simply human, vulnerable, hopeful, and committed to finding light even in darkness. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the remarkable history of clowns. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may you find humor in life's absurdities. May you embrace the wisdom of fools, and may you always remember that the bravest act is sometimes simply choosing to laugh.